Beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you.
Now let's see who our phony phantom really is.
I grew up with Scooby-Doo. I loved watching Fred, Daphne, Thelma, Shaggy and Scooby solve mystery after mystery. And yet not once did it occur to me that it was basically exactly the same plot every week. Someone pretends to be someone they're not. Usually a ghost, to help ensure they can hold on to the family treasure or the family business or whatever. And they'd have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. As we step into chapter 6 of Matthew this week, we move into a new section of the Sermon on the Mount. And it centres on Jesus giving a message that might have appeared in any episode of Scooby-Doo. Stop pretending you're someone you're not. They're not the words that Jesus actually uses. He calls these people hypocrites or play actors. But his message is the same. Don't be a phony. Be someone whose actions show that you're serious about your relationship with God, about living right. Because following Jesus is not something to play at. Let's remind ourselves where we've been. The Sermon on the Mount began with the Beatitudes, the blessing statements. It reminded us of the importance of living as salt and light, and went on to explore the new interpretation of the law that Jesus brought. Same laws, but deeper. How to live with righteousness. That's right relationship with God and one another in everything you do. Now, as we step into chapter 6, and having been shown the right kind of righteousness, Jesus takes a moment to stop and to contrast this with the wrong kind of righteousness. In relation to giving and to prayer and to fasting, he gives us the warnings of living out our faith with self-righteousness, thinking we're holier than thou, saying, look at me, look what I'm doing for God, making out that we're the ones making the difference. Jesus' words for these people, as we've already discovered, are pretty harsh. Hypocrites, frauds, phonies, charlatans, play actors. Not many places to hide when words like that are being used. We've spoken a few times though, haven't we, of how Jesus was so good at speaking to people in ways that connected, that made sense to them. And as I read about the context of these words, I discovered that sometime in the early 1st century AD, in those first 30 or so years of Jesus' life, a huge 2,500-seater Roman Greco theatre was built just 4 miles outside of Nazareth. A theatre. Something like that would have had a huge influence on the people of the region. Even if they weren't able to attend themselves, the idea of plays and actors and people pretending to be something they're not would certainly have been something they understood. And that's what Jesus latched onto as he talked about hypocrites. People who were acting. As we explore these 4 verses, I have a feeling we'll see 1 or 2 more examples. Jesus starts with the warning that introduces all 3 of these themes: giving, prayer and fasting. Beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Essentially, Jesus is asking the people, who's your audience? Another of those play references. When you're doing something good, who is it that you're trying to impress? Is it your friends, your peers, the people you live and work and do life with? Or is it God and God alone? And he carries on with an example specifically about giving. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. There are a few things to note here. Firstly, although we've moved on from the 6 examples Jesus gave in chapter 5 about his fulfillment of the law, once again, Jesus is taking something well known to the Jewish people from ancient scriptures and he's going deeper. He chooses giving because it's a good thing to do. We should be careful not to miss that really simple point here. But what he says finds its origins in Deuteronomy 15, verses 10 to 11. In the Message version, it says this: give freely and spontaneously. Don't have a stingy heart. The way you handle matters like this triggers God. Your God's blessing in everything you do, all your work and ventures. There are always going to be poor and needy people among you. So I command you, always be generous. Open purse and hands. Give to your neighbours in trouble, your poor and hurting neighbours. So it's good to do it, but it's how you do it that matters. Jesus is warning against making a big show of your giving, and he does that by saying, whenever you give alms, charitable gifts, don't sound a trumpet before you. Blowing a trumpet, of course, would almost guarantee you get noticed. Now, not only is this one of the likely origins of the phrase blowing your own trumpet, but it's another theatrical reference. Trumpets were used to announce particular moments of action or a new scene in a play. In essence, that's what Jesus is saying. Don't make a theatre of your giving, or in fact, of any other aspect of your faith life. It's between you and God, and best it stays that way. Which leads me to the final part of this video short. Once again, just as there was in the Beatitudes, Jesus speaks of reward. Your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Some of us might find it difficult to think of reward from God for our actions, but I think there's a healthy motivation here. Jesus, as he will a few times throughout Matthew's Gospel, is trying to get us to look up and ahead to an eternal life in heaven and living for that rather than living for the short-term worldly rewards which one day will count for nothing. I'll finish with an example that might help land that for us. It's the story of a young prodigy, a pianist, giving his first concert at the Royal Festival Hall in London. His reputation preceded him. The concert was sold out on the day the tickets were first available. His brilliance at the piano exceeded all expectations on the evening. When he finished his last piece, the audience went wild. They stood to their feet spontaneously and shouted and cheered. The young pianist bowed quickly and hurried off the stage while the audience begged him to come back. As he stood in the wings, the stage manager whispered to him, "Go, quickly, they're yelling for you." But the young man wasn't moving. Instead, he peered through a crack in the curtain, anxiously scanning the audience. No, I can't go out there," he said. The stage manager was bordering on annoyance. "Look, son, they're on their feet. Trust me, they don't do this for everybody. Go out and enjoy it." The boy continued to scan the audience, until finally the stage manager cracked. He shouted, "Get out there! They're standing for you!" The young pianist looked at him and whispered, "They're not all standing. Do you see that old man in the last row from the back? He is still seated." "Who cares about one old man?" said the stage manager. The boy answered him with steely determination. "I care. That's my teacher," he said. "When he stands, I can take that bow."